Read. Where was I at, bruh? We'll start at almost immediately. We began structuring a multi-million dollar refinancing package. Hold up. We're going to get into a refinancing package. What do y'all think to join me? A refinancing package refers to the process of replacing an existing loan with a new loan that has different terms and conditions. Okay. With an eye towards an equity investment for ourselves and our press perch partners. However, we were never able to put together the major equity deal we had hoped for. So we focused our attention on the airline. We recommended across the board cuts in personnel, advised on aircraft acquisitions, and arranged for an extension of the $18 million debt the airline held with Barclays Bank. Eventually, Bob and I, without press perch involvement, were hired as advisors to the airline at a retainer fee of 4,000 per month. Okay. We were able to attract. Uh, we were able to attract to Trinidad an old friend of mine from TWA, Bob Galloway, as BWIA's general manager. I would also involve Bob in our airlines years later. Bob worked at professionalizing BWIA while we worked on putting together an investment plan. By September 1967, Prime Minister Williams had accepted in, in principle our proposal to reorganize, refinance, and expand the company. Principle. Hold up, man. Just the wording. This phrase, accepted in principle, means that an idea or proposal has been agreed upon conceptually, but it may still require further details or formal approval. It indicates acceptance of the general terms or conditions of the deal without having completed or agreed upon the specific details. So he agreed to it, didn't go through with the deal just yet. Accepted in principle our proposal to reorganize, refinance, and expand the company. We persuaded two investors, Herb Allen Jr. of Allen and Company and Dick Pastel Pistel of Goldfield Corporation to put up $1.5 million, which allowed us to buy a 49% stake in BWIA through a new company we formed called Caribbean International. Boy, these niggas was getting the job done. This photo on Boeing demo flight with Bill Allen, Boeing president, and Sir Ellis Clark, BWIA chairman and ambassador to U.S. 1968. As president and director of Caribbean International and as a director of BWIA, I commuted to Trinidad on a regular basis, every other week or so, usually for 2 days at a stretch. One of our first moves was to reposition the airline. To accomplish this, we upgraded the name slightly to BWIA International, introduced a new logo, a steel drum surrounding the BWIA insignia, and hired the advertising agency of McCaffrey and McCall to help spread the word. Let me see. Let's see what it looking like. Okay, okay. Had to revamp that joint. I see you. Because we were operating just one flight a day to New York and Miami, we had a limited advertising and promotion budget, only $150,000, which even in those days wouldn't have been enough for a full scale campaign in those cities it cities where were it not full of windfall of free publicity. Hold up, wouldn't have been enough for a full scale campaign in those cities were it not for a windfall of free publicity. Okay. To get the widest reach with our limited dollars, we decided to go with a signboard campaign on the New York City bus and subway system and on commuter railroad platforms. Signboard camp. Okay, I get it. Put it like on an actual bus or subway train. Okay. Commuter railroad platforms. The agency came up with a particularly clever piece of advertising, a picture of a glorious stretch of white sand underneath an inviting blue sky, a landscape enhanced by a shapely young woman, shot at a distance, her back to the camera with visible tan lines where her bikini was supposed to be. The tagline, the unheard of airline to unheard of islands. I see the sex sells. I'll admit that the ad was mildly suggestive, but there was certainly nothing let's before I even attempt lascivious of a person, manner, or gesture, feeling or revealing an overt and often offensive sexual desire. Lascivious was certainly nothing lascivious or objectionable about it. Certainly not by today's standards. Had it run as planned, the campaign might have made a small splash and brought us the slow trickle of warm weather seekers we so desperately needed to turn things around. But New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, in its these words, yo, prurience, having or encouraging an excessive interest in sexual matters, in its prurience phobic wisdom, rejected the ad, which they claimed did not meet its standards of community decent decency. Okay, all right. Behavior. Yeah, yep. And once we were banned from the subways, buses, and commuter railroad platforms, we were all over the news. We couldn't have planned it better. Suddenly, our unheard of airline was much talked about, and we didn't even make a dent in our advertising budget. It turned out to be the smartest $150,000 we never spent. It also turned out to be a valuable lesson for me about publicity instead of just advertising, which I would put to use many times in later years. Like the Xantop deal, the continuing advisory fees from BWIA helps stake our company at an important time. Very early on, regrettably, the equity position we took in Caribbean International turned out to be nearly worthless by the time we got out of the airline. By the time we got out of the airline in 1971, but in many ways it offered an invaluable lesson. Where else would a couple of kids still shy of 30 have gotten the opportunity to virtually run an international airline? It was an incredible, rich learning experience, even if it wasn't very profitable. Keyword, a rich learning experience. I learned, keywords. I learned what it was like to head a big company, deal with foreign governments in our own State Department, implement a seat of the pants marketing strategy, negotiate aircraft purchases, and bring competing and sometimes conflicting interests to the bargaining table. Most importantly, I learned how to manage as a mid level analyst and later as an advisor. I never really had an opportunity to direct a team of employees, authoritatively assess a colleague's strengths and weaknesses, hire and fire, motivate, and generally ensure that the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. Here, to my surprise and pleasure, I found that I enjoyed bearing direct responsibility for the full range of decisions facing any business leader, and that I thrived on delegating authority to good people. At each new vantage point, from TWA and Eastern to Xantop and BWIA, I was discovering things about my inner entrepreneurial to go along with everything I was learning about business. With three key deals to our credit, I was confident that Bob and I would do great things before too long. Okay. Midway, though, our protracted BWI association, retracted, all right, lasting for a long time or longer than, okay. Our protracted BWI association, our ranks at Lorenzo, Carney, and Co. swelled to include Rob Schneedeker, Snedeker, yo, these names, who had been a young star at Time Incorporated, and Andy Feuerstein, Feuerstein, a freshly minted Harvard Law School graduate. The two hires gave us sorely needed depth, yeah, but they also put some pressure on us to produce income. Despite our relative success, Bob and I didn't take any real money out of the business for the first year or so. We didn't need to. Our lives were the business. We had no major personal expenses. Most of our lunches or dinners during the week were with prospective clients. We were like we were as likely to be out of town as at home, and we never took conventional vacations, even if we did enjoy an occasional free day in Trinidad. The only time I had to dip into my own pocket was to pay rent on my apartment and pick up the tab on a date. But suddenly we had two guys on the payroll and the pressure was on right away, even when it was just the four of us sniffing out deals. Bob and I thought it was important to institute some formal structure for our growing company. I became chairman, and Bob was president and chief operating officer. He was the guy who handled day to day problems, and I was the big picture, more external guy. Bob and I would scout the deals, and with Rob and Andy, develop the strategy and see them through. All right, man, this was a good read. We're going to have to go ahead and continue this another time. Y'all stay tuned.